Hello high schoolers, Miss Patrick tuning in here because today we're going to be starting our building process for our ceramic still lifes. I've created my own mock-up still life here to show you how these can be arranged in different ways and include elements that make the overall composition more expressive. Through this project, we're going to be exploring concepts of recreation through representation. So I want you to kind of explore how traditional still lifes can be altered and made into your own, and that will come later too with the overall painting onto whether you want to do a glaze or if you want to paint on with acrylics or watercolors. That will all be part of the process too. But today I'm just going to be showing you how to start with these by creating simple fruits and different arrangements by using pinch pots. At this point, we've taken the time to learn about various ceramic artists, mostly Annette Shifton, and her still life series. And we've learned a brief history of still lifes and looked at various reference images. But for now, let's review. Annette Shifton is a ceramic artist based in New York, and she uses artistic and decorative motifs found throughout Western art history, floral centerpieces, and arranged still life vignettes to explore her relationships to both nature as a human being as well as an artist. In contrast to Annette Shifton, we can reflect upon traditional still life artworks throughout history, such as Basket of Fruit by Caravaggio, which was painted around 1599, and The Basket of Apples by Paul Cézanne. When we look at these artworks, we focus on the composition and arrangements of the objects within the work and how they can be expressive. By now, you should have 2 to 3 initial sketches brainstorming the forms you are going to be creating and how you want to present or arrange them for the final display. Before we get into the making process, I want to review a few safety tips to keep in mind while working with these tools. So some tools such as pin tools, metal ribs, a knife, and cutting tools are very sharp and need to be handled consciously and with care. Clay is not edible and should not be ingested, so if you are eating, please step away from your workspace. Keep a bucket or a cup of water and some wet paper towels handy because they could be useful for wiping your hands clean while you are working. Wearing a smock or an apron can also be helpful to prevent clay and other materials from traveling onto your clothes. Next, we're going to gather some of the tools that we're going to be using for this demonstration. So you're going to want your serrated rib, a normal metal rib, some wooden tools, a pin tool, a knife tool, some plastic to keep your clay wet, and a bucket or a cup of water. To start the setup, I've laid out a clean surface with newspapers to work on, and I've gone ahead and I've taped down the edges so that they don't move while I'm working. Gather all of your tools and have them handy to make the building process easier. Gather the clay that you will be working with and keep excess clay in the bag to avoid drying out. To start my demonstration, I'm going to show you how to make simple forms like a pear using pinch pots. Now, with your ceramic still life, you can make a lot of different fruit. You can make an apple, you can make a banana, or you could just make something like a cup or some sort of vessel to go along. But I have some live fruit here that I'm referring to constantly as I'm making this, just so that I can be sure to get the forms right. So I'm going to be cutting a piece of clay out of this larger chunk, and then I'm going to put this aside and wrap this back up for later to avoid it drying out. I'm going to put this to the side for now and just work with this ball. So like we've done before, you're just going to start by wedging out some of the clay, pressing it into the table until all of the air bubbles are worked through it. Once I've wedged my ball of clay and got all of the air pockets out of it, I'm going to again take my wire tool and cut straight down the center to make 2 halves. Once I have my 2 halves, I'm going to again make these into ball forms. But since I'm making a pear and I can see that they're a little more oval rather than just round, I can start to kind of wedge it upward, my half, and then I'm just gonna start pressing my thumb into the clay to create the pinch pot. It's important to do this rather than have just a solid form that we're shaping, because too thick of clay going into a kiln can cause explosions, and if your piece explodes, it could ruin another student's. So just be cautious and try and make the walls of your clay pretty thin when you're working. So I'm gonna make this into kind of an oval form, and I'm gonna do the same to the other half. You wanna make sure that your shapes are relatively similar in size so that when you later go to attach them, they fit with each other nicely. So I'm just gonna stretch this one out a little more to make it fit. And then I'm gonna be taking my serrated rib and just serrating along the edges here. And serrating it just makes it easier for your piece to kind of fit together later on, rather than just having two smooth edges try and go together. This kind of creates some friction so that they hold together better. For this, I'm not adding any slip, but I will just add a little water to the edge. I don't like it to be too wet because then things slide around while you're trying to attach them. So I'm just adding a little bit of water to one of the edges. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just attach the two forms. And if one of the edges kind of overlays, that's completely fine, because we're gonna start pulling down the clay to attach them. And we're just gonna do this all the way around. And just kind of roughly do this, but be gentle so that you don't pop your vessel. So once you have this, you're gonna take your serrated rib again and just go over all the edges that you just overlaid. It's good to have the hollow form here because it helps hold air in so that you can sculpt it easier. If there was a hole in it right now, it would be collapsing on itself. So the air bubble inside just helps you be able to form it. Right now I'm just serrating all over to make everything blend seamlessly together. The serrated rib pulls the clay and really just makes it stronger, I think. It's kind of a personal preference. I know some people don't like to serrate all over, but I do. So then once you have this kind of wonky form, you can start shaping it and take your metal rib and begin to smooth out some of the sides. And then you're just gonna start kind of forming, and I'm gonna use this little pair for a reference, but also refer to your sketch images and just start kind of forming the clay to represent this fruit. So it kind of gets skinnier at the top here, it bulges out a little at the bottom. And pears are interesting because their sides are kind of rigid. None of them are the same. So I'm kind of forming the bottom to be a little more round by patting it in and just forming some crevices here. And really just working the clay. Once you have a desired shape that you really like, then you can go back and smooth some things out. But at this point, I'm gonna add some details like a stem. So I'm pressing in some of the clay here to make a little groove for it. And then I'm going back and I'm grabbing more clay, just a little. You don't even have to cut it. You can just grab right from the clay. And I'm gonna just take an even smaller piece of this and kind of just roll it up with my fingers. And then I'm gonna, again, serrate this little edge, serrate a little bit in here. If you can't get it with your rib, you can just score it with a pin tool or something like that. I'm gonna add a little bit of water, just a little. Tap it in here and just press it in. And then I'm gonna use my fingers, but also you can take a tool for this and just smooth down the edges. Now here I'm making a pear, but this whole process can be repeated for other fruits and forms. So like an apple, I would have just made it more circular rather than going for an upward oval shape. For something like a banana, I would make a long boat-like pinch pot and attach the two halves. And then you just add details to them like so. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and smooth everything out at this point. And you can decide to be as expressive as you want with these. I'm smoothing out my edges, but as you can see here in this pear, it has a lot of little details. You could add those by stippling things in using your needle tool. And then later when you paint it, it would just enhance these design elements that you've already added. But for mine, I'm choosing to smooth this out. So I'm just using my thumbs and lightly doing it. I don't want to press too hard anywhere because I don't want my form to collapse. You can use just a normal metal rib for this. I would avoid taking a sponge and wetting it too much because that can make the clay weaker, but you can just take a little dry sponge and still get off excess clay with that. And just work it around until it's how you want it. Now that I have my form mostly done, I'm starting to think about how I would want to arrange this as a still life. I can look at it with my other fruits and kind of arrange them. Maybe one of my pieces of fruit are laying down. Maybe somewhere like that. And here you can see I've just like made a bowl and put some of these finished pieces that I've painted using acrylics and just arrange them as you want. But we can get into that later, and for now I just wanted to show you how to make some simple forms and fruit and just start thinking about your overall composition for your still lifes. After you've allowed some time to pass and for your form to stiffen up, you're gonna wanna go back with a needle tool and just pop a little air hole in the bottom here. This will allow for airflow through your vessel so that it doesn't explode in the kiln. And then you just wanna go back and just sign your initials on the bottom so you know which one was yours. Thank you so much for sitting in on this demo of how to create a simple form like a fruit for your overall still life composition. If you have any further questions, please reach out and ask, and I can't wait to see what you guys make.